The first time Josephine Reed laid eyes on Dallas Gentry, she was standing knee-deep in fallen apples with tears streaming down her face, certain that her life was over at 26 years of age. The autumn breeze carried her quiet sobs across Willow Creek Orchard, the property she had lovingly tended alongside her late husband for the past 5 years, until typhoid fever had stolen him just before the summer harvest. Colorado Territory, 1875. The land was unforgiving, but so was grief. Josephine, or Josie, as everyone in the nearby town of Silver Gulch called her, had spent the last 3 months in a daze, barely managing to keep herself alive, let alone the orchard that had been her husband Thomas's pride and joy. The apple trees stood heavy with fruit, much of it already fallen and rotting on the ground. The sweet, fermented scent mixed with the earthy aroma of autumn, and Josephine couldn't bear the waste. Thomas would have been devastated to see their hard work spoiling at her feet. She had come out that morning determined to salvage what she could, but the overwhelming task had broken her resolve. A basket lay overturned beside her, only a handful of apples nestled inside. Her calloused hands trembled as she pressed them against her tear-streaked face. "Madam, are you in need of assistance?" The deep voice startled her. She spun around, nearly losing her footing among the fallen fruit. A tall man stood at the edge of the orchard, hat in hand, revealing sun-bleached hair the color of wheat. His face was tanned and weathered, but his eyes were kind blue as the Colorado sky in summer. I'm fine," she managed, hastily wiping her tears with her apron, embarrassed to be caught in such a state. "Just gathering the harvest." The man glanced around at the hundreds of apples dotting the ground, then back at her nearly empty basket. His lips curved into a gentle smile. "Looks like quite the job for one person." Josephine straightened her shoulders, her pride flaring. "I can manage my own orchard, sir." "Never said you couldn't, madam." He replaced his hat and stepped closer, his spurs jingling softly. "Name's Dallas Gentry. I've just been hired on at the Hastings Ranch up the way. Was riding the boundary line when I spotted your orchard." He paused, eyes traveling over the rows of trees. "Finest apple trees I've seen in the territory." Despite herself, Josephine felt a swell of pride. "My husband planted everyone," Dallas nodded, understanding softening his features. "Your husband has a good eye for land," she corrected quietly. "He passed this summer." Dallas removed his hat again in a gesture of respect. "My condolences, Mrs. Reed, Josephine Reed." She gestured vaguely toward the house visible through the trees. "Willow Creek Orchard has been our home for 5 years now." Dallas's eyes followed her gesture, taking in the modest but well-built farmhouse with its wrap-around porch and smoke curling from the chimney. "It's a fine place, Mrs. Reed." An uncomfortable silence settled between them until Dallas cleared his throat. "If you're looking to save this harvest, I've got 2 hands that aren't doing anything particularly useful at the moment." Josephine's first instinct was to refuse. She'd been declining offers of help from townspeople for weeks, determined to prove she could manage on her own. But looking at the vast orchard and the mountain of work ahead, her resolve wavered. "I couldn't ask you to, you didn't ask, I offered." He picked up an apple from the ground, brushing it clean against his shirt before taking a bite. His eyebrows rose in appreciation. "These are mighty fine. Be ashamed to let them go to waste." Josephine hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I could use some help, Mr. Gentry, but I insist on paying you fair wages for your time." Dallas looked amused. "How about we start with lunch? Been riding since dawn and could use a meal. After that, we can discuss terms." And so began an arrangement that neither of them could have anticipated. Dallas returned the next day with empty burlap sacks and a determined look in his eye. Together, they began the methodical process of salvaging what they could of the harvest. Josephine was surprised to discover that Dallas knew his way around an orchard. "My pa had a few trees back in Missouri," he explained as he efficiently sorted apples, separating the best ones for market from those that would go into cider or preserves. "Nothing like this, but enough to learn the trade." For the first time since Thomas's death, Josephine found herself engaged in conversation that wasn't steeped in pity. Dallas asked questions about the different apple varieties, listened attentively to her explanations about soil and grafting techniques, and shared stories of his travels across the Western territories. He was easy company, respectful of her space and her grief, yet somehow making her feel less alone. By the end of the week, they had salvaged nearly half the harvest. Dallas had constructed a makeshift press for cider and taught Josephine how to operate it, his capable hands guiding hers on the wooden lever. "My ma used to say that good cider starts with sore arms," he joked as they worked side by side, the sweet juice flowing into wooden barrels. Josephine found herself smiling more often. The weight of her grief still pressed heavily on her heart, but Dallas's steady presence provided moments of respite, brief interludes where she could forget the hollow ache inside. One evening, as the autumn sun cast long shadows across the orchard, Dallas helped her load the last of the day's harvest onto her wagon. "You should be able to get a fair price for these in town tomorrow," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Josephine nodded, calculating figures in her head. It wouldn't be the profit they'd hoped for when planting these trees years ago, but it would be enough to keep her through winter. "I couldn't have done this without your help, Mr. Gentry." "Dallas," he corrected gently. "After a week of apple picking together, I reckon we can dispense with formalities." She smiled, surprising herself with how natural it felt. "Dallas, then, and I'm Josie to my friends." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he returned her smile. "Are we friends, Josie?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibilities neither was ready to acknowledge. "I believe we are," she answered finally. The next morning, Josephine rode into Silver Gulch with her wagon laden with apples. The small mining town was bustling, its main street filled with the usual mix of miners, shopkeepers, and ranch hands going about their business. She pulled her wagon up to Miller's General Store, where she had arranged to sell most of her harvest. George Miller, a portly man with a generous spirit, emerged from the shop wiping his hands on his apron. "Josie, wasn't sure we'd be seeing you this season," he called, coming to inspect her cargo. His eyebrows rose in appreciation. "These look mighty fine." "Had some help this year," she admitted as they began unloading. "So I've heard." George gave her a knowing look. "Word is that new hand from Hastings Ranch has been spending his spare time at Willow Creek." Josephine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Mr. Gentry has been kind enough to assist with the harvest, nothing more." George raised his hands in surrender. "Didn't mean anything by it, Josie. It's good to see you getting help." His expression softened. Thomas would have wanted that. After settling her account with George, Josephine made her way to the mercantile to purchase supplies. As she was examining fabric for new kitchen curtains, a familiar voice caught her attention. "Wouldn't have picked you for the floral type." She turned to find Dallas leaning against a shelf, his smile warm. He looked different in town. He'd shaved, and his clothes were neater than his work attire. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, setting down the fabric. "Had some business to attend to, figured I might run into you." He gestured to her nearly empty wagon outside. "Looks like sales went well." "Very. Mr. Miller took most of it." She hesitated, then added, "I've set aside your share of the profits." Dallas waved a hand dismissively. "Keep it. I was happy to help." "I insist," she said firmly. "We had an arrangement." Their friendly argument was interrupted by a commotion outside. Shouts and the sound of breaking glass drew them both to the window. A group of rough-looking men were harassing a young woman outside the saloon across the street. Without hesitation, Dallas strode outside, Josephine following close behind. As they approached, she recognized the woman as Emily Parker, who worked as a seamstress in town. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" Dallas's voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. The largest of the men, a bearded brute with liquor on his breath, sneered. "Nothing that concerns you, cowboy. Move along." Emily's frightened eyes met Josephine's. Taking advantage of the distraction, Josephine moved forward and took Emily's arm, pulling her away from the men. The bearded man lurched forward to grab Emily back, but Dallas stepped between them. "The lady doesn't seem interested in your company." "And who's going to stop me?" "You," the man laughed, but it died in his throat as Dallas's hand moved to rest on the pistol at his hip. "I'd rather not cause trouble in town," Dallas said quietly, "but I will if necessary." A tense moment passed before the bearded man spat on the ground. "She ain't worth the bullet. Come on, boys." He gestured to his companions and they retreated back into the saloon, casting dark looks over their shoulders. Once they were gone, Emily sagged with relief. "Thank you both. They've been harassing me for days." "Are you all right to get home?" Josephine asked, concerned. Emily nodded. "My brother's shop is just down the street. I'll be fine now." After ensuring Emily safely reached her destination, Josephine and Dallas returned to her wagon. "That was brave," she said as they walked. Dallas shrugged. "Couldn't stand by and watch. My ma raised me better than that." There was something in his quiet dignity that touched Josephine deeply. This man, whom she had known for barely a week, had shown more character than many she'd known for years. "Would you join me for dinner tonight?" she asked suddenly. "At the orchard, as thanks for your help with the harvest." Surprise flickered across his face, followed by a smile that reached his eyes. "I'd be honored, Josie." That evening, Josephine prepared a meal with more care than she had taken in months. She baked fresh bread, stewed rabbit with vegetables from her garden, and made an apple pie with the fruits of their labor. As she moved about the kitchen, she found herself humming a small thing, but significant. It had been so long since music had felt appropriate in her life. Dallas arrived just as the sun was setting, a bottle of wine in hand and his horse freshly groomed. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance, wearing a clean shirt and his best vest. "Something smells wonderful," he said as she welcomed him inside. The farmhouse felt different with him in it, warmer somehow, less haunted by memories. They ate at the small kitchen table, the lamplight casting a golden glow over their meal as they talked easily about their respective days. "This pie is extraordinary," Dallas declared, savoring his second slice. "Best I've had since leaving home." "My mother's recipe," Josephine admitted. "She always said the secret was in the spices. Your mother was a wise woman." He set down his fork, his expression turning serious. "Josie, there's something I should tell you." Her heart stuttered with unexpected anxiety. "What is it?" "I won't be staying at the Hastings Ranch much longer." He held up a hand as disappointment flashed across her face. "I've been offered work with the stage line. Better pay, but it would mean traveling between here and Denver." "Oh." She wasn't sure why this news affected her so strongly. "That sounds like a good opportunity." "It is," he agreed, "but I'd still be based here in Silver Gulch, and I'd like to continue helping with the orchard when I'm in town if you'll have me." Relief washed over her. "I'd appreciate that very much." As the evening drew to a close, Dallas helped her clear the table. Their hands brushed as she passed him a plate to dry, and the brief contact sent a jolt through her that was both thrilling and terrifying. "I should go," he said softly, setting down the dish towel. "Thank you for dinner." At the door, he paused. "Josie, I know it hasn't been long since your husband passed. I don't mean to presume anything, but I want you to know that I enjoy your company greatly." She met his gaze, seeing the sincerity there. "I enjoy yours too, Dallas." He nodded, seeming satisfied with that simple acknowledgement. "Good night, then." As she watched him ride away, Josephine felt a confusing mixture of emotions. Guilt that she could find pleasure in another man's company so soon after losing Thomas. Fear of opening herself to the possibility of more loss. And underneath it all, a tentative spark of something that felt dangerously like hope. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Dallas began his work with the stage line, which took him away for days at a time, but he always returned to Silver Gulch and to Willow Creek Orchard. He helped Josephine prepare the trees for winter, mended fences damaged in recent storms, and began teaching her to shoot with better accuracy. A woman on her own needs to protect herself. he insisted as they set up targets behind the barn. November brought the first snow, dusting the orchard in white. Dallas arrived one evening with lumber loaded in his wagon and a determined look in his eye. "Your roof won't last another winter," he declared, pointing out places where the shingles had begun to rot. Without waiting for her agreement, he set about making repairs, working from dawn until dusk for 3 days straight. Josephine watched him from below, passing up tools and materials as needed. "You don't have to do all this," she called as he hammered a new shingle into place. "I know," he replied simply. On the third day, as he was finishing the last section, his foot slipped on the icy roof. Josephine's heart stopped as he slid toward the edge, but he managed to catch himself on the gutter. The sudden weight tore the gutter from its moorings, sending Dallas tumbling to the ground with a sickening thud. "Dallas!" She ran to where he lay motionless in the snow. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead and his right arm was bent at an unnatural angle. Panic seized her as she knelt beside him. "Dallas, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain. "Guess I should have been more careful," he mumbled. Relief flooded her, quickly replaced by practical concern. "Don't move. Your arm looks broken." With considerable effort, Josephine managed to help Dallas inside and onto her bed. She sent her nearest neighbor's son for the doctor, while she cleaned the cut on Dallas's head and fashioned a makeshift splint for his arm. Dr. Wilson confirmed what she had suspected: a broken arm and a mild concussion. "He'll need rest," the doctor advised after setting the bone and applying a proper splint. "Shouldn't travel for at least 2 weeks. After the doctor left, Josephine sat by the bedside, watching Dallas drift in and out of sleep. His features were relaxed in repose, making him look younger and more vulnerable than the capable cowboy she had come to know. "You're staring," he murmured without opening his eyes. She startled, embarrassed to be caught. "Just making sure you're still breathing." One eye cracked open. "Takes more than a fall to get rid of me." He tried to shift position and winced. "Though it does hurt something fierce." The doctor left laudanum for the pain. Dallas shook his head. "Never did like how that stuff makes my head feel. I'll manage." Over the next few days, Josephine cared for Dallas as he had once cared for her orchard, with attentive dedication. She helped him eat, read to him when restlessness made him irritable, and changed his bandages with gentle hands. On the 4th night, as she was adjusting his pillows, Dallas caught her wrist. "Josie," he said softly, "you need to rest too." She sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. "I'm fine." "No, you're not. You've been running yourself ragged." His thumb traced small circles on the inside of her wrist, sending shivers up her arm. "Why are you doing all this for me?" The question hung in the air between them. Josephine stared at his hand on hers, unable to meet his eyes. Because you would do the same for me." "Is that the only reason?" Her heart hammered in her chest as she finally looked up. The intensity in his gaze made it impossible to dissemble. "No," she admitted. "That's not the only reason." Dallas's fingers tightened around hers. "When I fell from that roof, my first thought wasn't about the pain. It was that I might not see you again, and that scared me more than anything." Tears welled in Josephine's eyes. "I've been so afraid to feel anything again. After Thomas died, I thought that part of me was gone forever. And now," Dallas's voice was barely above a whisper, "now I'm terrified because it isn't gone. Because every time you ride away, I count the hours until you return." She took a shaky breath. "But I feel like I'm betraying him." "Loving again doesn't dishonor what you had with him," Dallas said gently. "Thomas would want you to be happy, wouldn't he?" The simple truth of his words broke something loose inside her. Tears flowed freely now as she nodded. "Yes, he would." Dallas raised his good hand to her cheek, brushing away a tear with his thumb. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, Josie. Just know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere except maybe off roofs." His attempt at humor made her laugh through her tears. The sound seemed to fill a space in the room that had been empty for too long. As the days passed and Dallas's strength returned, their relationship shifted. There was an honesty between them now, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first day in the orchard. They talked long into the evenings about their pasts, their hopes, the people they had loved and lost. Dallas spoke of his childhood in Missouri, of losing both parents to influenza when he was 20 and drifting westward in search of purpose. Josephine shared stories of meeting Thomas at a church social back east, of their dreams of building something together in the West, and of the devastating speed with which typhoid had taken him. "We never had children," she confessed one evening as they sat before the fire. "We tried, but it just never happened. Thomas used to say the apple trees were our children, something we could nurture and watch grow together." Dallas listened, offering neither platitudes nor advice, simply the gift of his attention. In return, Josephine found herself wanting to know everything about him, the way his eyes crinkled when he was holding back laughter, the stories behind each scar on his weathered hands. By the time Dallas was well enough to return to his duties with the stage line, something fundamental had changed between them. The night before his departure, they stood together on the porch, watching the stars emerge above the dormant orchard. "I'll be back in a week," Dallas promised, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Josephine nodded, fighting the familiar anxiety that rose at the thought of his leaving. "I know." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Josie, when I come back, there's something important I want to ask you, but I need you to be sure you're ready to hear it." Her heart fluttered wildly. She knew what he meant, had seen the question forming in his eyes for days now. I think I will be." Dallas smiled, the gentle curve of his lips holding more promise than any words could convey. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tender, almost reverent, a question more than a demand. Josephine found herself answering by rising on her tiptoes, her hands coming to rest on his chest as she returned the kiss with newfound certainty. When they finally parted, Dallas rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since I first saw you crying in that orchard." She laughed softly, "Even with my face all blotchy from tears, especially then." His smile turned serious. "I think I started falling in love with you right at that moment, seeing how much you cared, how deeply you felt." The word love hung in the air between them, neither frightening nor premature, but simply right. "Safe travels," she whispered as he finally pulled away. "Keep that pistol close while I'm gone," he reminded her, ever practical even as his eyes held hers with unmistakable tenderness. The week of Dallas's absence passed more slowly than any Josephine could remember. She kept busy preparing for winter, chopping wood, preserving the last of her garden's bounty, and mending clothes by the fire in the evenings. On the day of his expected return, she found herself watching the road from her kitchen window, heart leaping at every distant sound of hoofbeats. When the appointed hour came and went with no sign of him, anxiety began to gnaw at her. The stage line was notoriously unpredictable, and winter delays were common due to weather or road conditions. Still, as darkness fell with no Dallas, Josephine found herself pacing the floor, imagining every possible disaster. By midnight, she had convinced herself of the worst, that history was repeating itself, that she was destined to lose everyone she dared to love. Sleep eluded her as she sat vigil by the window, watching the moon track across the star-filled sky. Dawn brought fresh snow and renewed hope. Josephine was dozing in her chair when the sound of approaching hoofbeats jerked her awake. She ran to the door, flinging it open without even stopping for a shawl. Dallas sat astride his horse, snow dusting his shoulders and hat. His face was drawn with exhaustion, but it broke into a smile at the sight of her. "You're late," she called, trying to sound stern despite the tears of relief threatening to fall. "Stage got held up by bandits outside of Denver," he explained, dismounting stiffly. "No one was hurt, but they took the strongbox and we had to wait for the law." As he approached the porch, Josephine could see a bruise darkening his cheek and a tear in his coat. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and pine. I thought. She began, her voice muffled against his chest. I know what you thought. His arms tightened around her. I rode through the night to get back to you, Josie. Nothing was going to stop me. Inside, as Dallas warmed himself by the fire and Josephine prepared a hot meal, he reached into his pocket. I have something for you. Was going to wait until I'd had a chance to clean up, but I reckon now's as good a time as any. From his pocket, he withdrew a small wooden box, carved with the delicate pattern of apple blossoms. Josephine's hands trembled as she took it from him. Inside lay a ring not ostentatious or flashy, but a simple gold band set with a small pearl. It was my mother's, Dallas explained. She told me to save it for the woman who made me feel like I'd finally found home. Josephine looked up at him, tears blurring her vision. And have you? Yes. He took her hands in his, the ring nestled between their palms. Josephine Reed, I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but I've seen your strength, your kindness, your ability to love deeply. I want to spend my life with you tending this orchard, building a family, growing old together among these apple trees. He dropped to one knee, snow still melting from his boots onto her kitchen floor. Will you marry me, Josie? The answer rose from her heart without hesitation. Yes. As Dallas slipped the ring onto her finger, Josephine felt the last shadowy corner of grief in her heart give way to light. Thomas would always be part of her story, but her life was continuing, branching out like one of her beloved apple trees, reaching for the sun after a long winter. Spring came early that year, as if nature itself approved of their union. They were married on a clear April morning beneath the apple trees, which had burst into a riot of pale pink blossoms. The entire town of Silver Gulch turned out for the celebration, tables laden with food stretching from the farmhouse to the barn. As the fiddle struck up a lively tune and Dallas led his bride in their first dance as husband and wife, Josephine caught sight of something that made her breath catch. A single perfect apple blossom had fallen into Dallas's wheat gold hair. What is it? He asked, noticing her expression. She reached up to pluck the blossom, showing it to him with a smile. A blessing from the orchard, she said, a promise of good things to come. That autumn brought the most bountiful harvest Willow Creek orchard had ever seen. Dallas and Josephine worked side by side, their movements now synchronized by months of partnership. He no longer worked for the stage line, having used his savings to buy a quarter share in the nearby Hastings Ranch. The arrangement allowed him to be home every night while still pursuing his love of horses and cattle. As they gathered the last of the apples one golden October afternoon, almost a year to the day since they first met, Dallas paused in his work. Do you ever regret saying yes? Trading a dashing stage driver for a simple rancher? Josephine set down her basket and came to stand before him, taking his weathered hands in hers. Not for a single moment, she said truthfully. You gathered more than just apples that day, Dallas Gentry. You gathered the broken pieces of my heart and helped me make it whole again. He kissed her then, among the trees that had witnessed their beginning. And as the autumn sun cast long shadows across Willow Creek orchard, Josephine knew with absolute certainty that this man, this land, this love was exactly where she was meant to be.